Hello and welcome. It's another Confessions podcast from your friends at BBC Radio 2. Are you ready for another batch of simple confessions? Here we go with a perverse postcard potboiler, a contrary camping camel, a loose liberated lyric, and some angry Aussie ashes. This is just going to carry on forever. And some angry Aussie ashes. Yes. Here it all comes. So tonight's tale, it's a short, it's not that long, so we'll be.
That's why we're doing the tent gags.
That's right, just filling up this. Otherwise, I'll have to play some Matt Cardle or something. Yeah. Oh. Which is a very good track, and I like it very much.
We love that track.
He's coming very soon on the show. Well, he was. Dopey Kirk from Leeds sends in tonight's tale. Thank you, Dopey Kirk. Dear Father Simon and the Forgiving Crew, before I start, can I just say that I don't for 1 minute expect to be forgiven?
Good.
Mm-hmm. My confession is very short, with no conclusion, but I often wonder what could have happened. On my way home from work one evening, this is about 45 years ago, I spotted a postcard on the ground which had been written, addressed and stamped and apparently dropped on the way to posting. I looked around for a postbox, but then saw my bus coming, so ran for the bus, intending to post the card later. Once on the bus, I took the card out of my pocket and I had a quick read. Now I know already that this was the wrong thing to do, but let me ask, who would not have done the same? I think we probably would have done, wouldn't we? You'd read the card, because if it's really private, then it's not going to go up anyway, so that's what he does. It was a postcard of Yorkshire sights, written by a first-year female student at Leeds University, the young lady being called Sandy. She was Australian and was writing to her mum and dad in Australia, telling them that she'd settled in well at university. The course was fine, she'd made lots of friends, and was looking forward to seeing them at Christmas. All fine. You're still with me, I think. But we were stuck in traffic on the bus, and we still had a way to go, and I got restless, and then I got bad. For some reason, I thought it would be a good wheeze to spice it up. So I added a PS at the bottom of the postcard, in the same colour ink, and attempted the same handwriting, simply saying, "Oh, PS, great news, by the way, I'm 3 months pregnant."
Oh, no. Oh, I see.
I then posted it, and that's it, end of story. I have no idea what happened next, but it might have taken a while to sort.
Yep.
You think? So if this rings a bell with anybody, I'm very, very sorry. I think we've changed the names, actually, so I don't actually think it was about Sandy. But anyway, if that was you, and you then got a phone call, because, 45 years ago, this was a bit of an issue. Anyway, I can understand how you would be tempted, but really the enormousness and the enormity, indeed, of writing, "By the way, I'm pregnant," in a card to your folks, I think that's a bit of a shocker. Sister Rebecca.
That was very, very mischievous, wasn't it? But I think it shows that Dopey Kirk has a great sense of humour, and you'd hope that after the initial shock, unless the family disowned her, but if that didn't happen, they would be able to just speak to each other.
That might have been the final communication ever.
It could have been, but you would have thought they'd just speak to each other on the telephone and sort it out.
It cost a fortune 45 years ago.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I think you sort of would hope that they'd sort it out. So I think the fact that he is actually very, very funny in doing that makes me forgive.
Wow, I'm surprised. I thought it was going to be very stern. Sister Bobby, I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, no, I think I'm completely opposite. I'm shocked, because I am quite mischievous. And I liked the first bit and went, oh, yeah, this could be fun. You could do wonderful, lovely things with, I really love you, I miss you, and I'm sorry for not tidying my bedroom all those years and being away. You could do all sorts of lovely things. I think the implications of this are so great. You're not called Dopey Kirk for nothing, are you, Dopey?
He's not actually called Kirk either, but anyway, he's
You know
dopey.
what I mean? But just implications way too big. You are certainly not forgiven, sir.
Who knows?
Not forgiven.
Who knows what the reaction was in Australia?
Yeah, but that's way too dangerous to mess with, surely.
Yeah.
Surely. He should have known that.
Yeah.
There is a degree of etiquette, I think, involved in postcards, and chief amongst that is that do not include any information on a postcard that you're not happy for everyone to read, because everyone will read it. Because if I saw a postcard lying on the floor, I would obviously read it just to read it. And that makes me think that the family knew it was a joke straight away when it arrived, because they would have known that Sandy would not have included information like that in a postcard, unless Sandy was the kind of person who didn't know anything about postcard etiquette, like we all do. In which case,
so therefore,
I
subtle,
am going to forgive.
I disagree with you, Matt. I think
Well,
you're wrong.
I am
Because not all
going
families
to
are the
not
same.
forgive.
You're going to not forgive.
Because I've been talked around by Bobby. I'm not forgiving.
What is today, Matt? What is today?
It's Bastille Day.
There you go.
And
what do the French commemorate on Bastille Day?
when they stormed the Bastille, and
That's right.
yes,
French Revolution. And how many prisoners were there in the Bastille?
it was like 2.
It was 2.
Yeah. Oh, was it 2?
Yeah, it was 2 or 1 or none. But it was basically
nobody's in.
It was no big deal.
Sorry.
Anyway, dear Father Simon, the Drive Time Collective, this comes from Mick. Thank you very much indeed. Merci bien. We'd like to take you back, if we may, to the summer of 1991 and our holiday to the Dordogne in France. We'd camped for many years in the UK, but we thought we'd try further south in the hope of finer weather. Anyway, we were wrong because it still rained, but that's nothing to do with the tale. We arrived at our site with suntan lotion and Wellington boots and all the other paraphernalia that goes with a camping trip. Terry, the site representative, showed us to our plot. Not a bad spot overlooking the site with a clear view of the play areas so that we could keep an eye on our 8-year-old son, Tom. Next to our pitch was a molehill-type pile of sandy-coloured mud that Terry had just finished moving to unblock a drainage ditch. Ah, the delights of camping. Naturally, our inquisitive 8-year-old asked, "What's that big pile near our tent?" "Oh," we said, "that's camel dung." No need to worry. "Camel dung," he says. "Does that mean we've got camels on site?" "Yes," we said. "That's why we chose the site, because it's got camels. We've stayed on farms with chickens, cows, goats and other farmyard animals, and we got bored, so we thought this would be different. So we've come somewhere with camels." Tom lost no time in heading to the playground, where after making new friends, the word soon spread around the site that there were camels. We shared our story with Terry, who was happy to join in with our little ruse. With the kids all tucked up for the night, Terry and I began to make a camel. The moon was shining bright as the construction took place. In a distant hedge, we used brown blankets, broom handles and umbrellas to create a pretty convincing camel. Well, convincing to your average 8-year-old who hasn't seen a camel. And I have to say, from a distance, even I was fooled. After his morning visit to the playground, children of various nationalities now knew that there was indeed a camel on the site. Terry, for he was the official camel keeper by this point, had told the children not to go too close to the magnificent-looking specimen that stood at the bottom of the far field because it was mating season. And he could get a little aggressive. Indeed, he could get the hump, as it were. Naturally, thank you. Naturally, that was an ad-lib. Naturally, there was disappointment among the children because they were hoping to ride the unusual campsite resident. But because Terry was the camel expert, his word was accepted. And although disappointed, they went back to the playground. Whilst the kids were distracted, the camel was taken away for feeding. At least that's what we told them. Now, our story doesn't finish there. We were on a roll, to be honest, and enjoying our little game. A few days later, and a few constructions of the fake camel in different locations around the site, it was Bastille Day, 14th of July. We extended our plot to include the campsite owner, who we shall call Pierre. Yes, Simon, it's going to be time for a French accent very soon. There was to be a big barbecue on the site to celebrate the special day commemorating, as we now know, the storming of the Bastille, La 14 Juillet. Pierre, after a few translation problems, agreed to offer on the menu camel burgers. Camel burgers avec frites. And he shouted out, Simon, best French voice, please. Attention, attention, ici votre Bastille Day chameau burgers et frites.
Chameau, is that right?
Chameau. I imagine...
Chameau.
Chameau. C-H-A-M-E-A-O. Chameau.
Is that where you get chamois leathers from?
Yes.
To do your car?
No, it's not.
I don't know. They're not.
Similar
Chamois leathers aren't made of camel.
Oh, just checking,
They
because it
come
sounded
from-
similar, you see. Your French accent was similar.
There's a little diversion there. Anyway, camel burgers, chameau burgers et frites. I think we all know. Anyway, Pierre also chalked this up on his daily specials board. The children were shocked, outraged and aghast until we provided tomato ketchup and then they ate them with gusto. I'll have a camel burger. Thanks very much. So, Simon and the collective, we'd like to seek your forgiveness for making up the story of the camel. Not from our son Tom, after all, as certain members of your collective will agree, That's why we have kids in the first place,
Yep.
to make stuff up. But we seek forgiveness from all the other children on the site from different countries around the world who may still believe that the French serve camel burgers as a delicacy to commemorate Bastille Day. We would like to assure all listeners that no camels were harmed in this story, and we hope that after hearing it, no one has the hump. There's another joke. Same reference. We hope our confession is considered, if only to embarrass our son, who is now 31, but still recalls the story and it still brings a smile to our faces. Well, it's a good tale. So we get to laugh at the French and we make up stuff to kids. What's not to like?
It was a very elaborate hoax, wasn't it? I mean, the danger is that with all those types of hoaxes, is that where will it end? I mean, you spend your entire holiday building fake camels. And
I love
various
the idea, the fact this
parts
camel
of
turned
the
up all
campsite.
over the place.
I know, but I mean, it takes up a lot of your holiday time. I love the way that Pierre was in on it and even put it on the board. But the bit I love most about this story is the fact that the kids were shocked until the ketchup arrived.
Yeah.
Then they just changed their opinion. It was fine
Whatever.
to eat camel.
I'll eat
so for that reason, it's a good tale, good joke. I'm going to forgive.
Okay, Mick's got one there. What about Sister Bobby, who is notably, a bit of a veg militant?
I'm with Rebecca. I loved it. I loved the effort as well. Thank you for going kind of right the way through it and just impersonating a camel in kind of half light, when you could actually make it believable. It takes a lot of effort. So well done. The only thing is I can forgive you, but I think there are other parents, that might not forgive you for the addition of it's mating season. Because that's a whole different explanation. So I forgive you, but there may be parents that might give you a kind of...
Do
stern
camels
look.
even have a mating season?
Yes.
Do they? Oh, you said that with great
Well,
authority.
because obviously there are baby camels, so something
I'm
happens.
not saying do they mate. I'm saying, is there a particular time of the year when they're more... Anyway, already...
Moving on.
I'm sure we'll find out
I'm sure.
from knowledgeable listeners.
It's almost certain that we're going to have a camel gallery very shortly. Not a mating camel gallery either, just an ordinary camel gallery.
Yeah.
Matthew, you haven't said anything yet.
Yes, I'm definitely going to forgive because, as we've already established, it's fine to lie to kids and then hope that they spread those lies with other kids. Definitely, and I like Rebecca. I love the fact that they were all very principled until someone brings out the Tommy sauce and say, "Oh right, fine, I'm going to put that one in a bap, lovely, with my freet." So I am definitely going to forgive.
Here's another Drive Tide confession. This one coming from John. Thank you very much indeed. Dear Father Simon and the Sisters of Mercy, my name is John. Why do I tell you this at the start of the confession? Well, because it is crucial to the story, and so unlike many of the listeners who have submitted confessions to your virtuous self, I am unable to hide behind any pseudonym. Father Simon, I wish to be granted absolution for the worry and trauma I caused my mother one long weekend 30 years ago. In my defence, it was an accident. I made one simple innocent mistake, and I was oblivious to the upset it caused. However, I should admit that I am not convinced that I deserve your forgiveness, as despite being a loving son, I still find it very funny 30 years later. In the mid-1980s, I lived with my mum and dad in the far north of England. And by the far north, I don't mean Manchester or Liverpool or even Billinge, I mean Cumbria. If you go any further north, you trip over Hadrian's Wall and fall into Scotland. I attended sixth form at the same school in the small market town as attended by your recent distinguished guest, Melvin Bragg, though he got slightly better exam results than me. As I looked through my rose-tinted spectacles, it was a glorious time, packed with parties, killer table tennis, and endless card games of cheat and crazy eights. We lived at large in Cumbria. I don't know who spent more time in the pubs, us or the teachers. Anyway, unfortunately, our 2 years of school fun was spoilt by a disastrous set of exam results, which have never been equalled before or since at our school. So proud. Anyway, it did have a reputation for excellence until we came along. It was a real nadir of achievement. I, like many of my peers, failed miserably. I managed to get into a local technical college to study business studies. Of course, I had no business doing, as I did next to no studying at all. My best friend Mike, I've changed his name to protect his anonymity, had arrived in Cumbria at the start of sixth form from a town in the far south called Billinge. Mike had high hopes and real potential to follow his brother into Cambridge. However, after 2 years under the tutelage of his newfound friends, he managed to scrape into Manchester Poly, which is, of course, a fine, a very fine, but different times. They say that out of every negative there comes a positive. And the positive for Mike was that Manchester was just close enough for those very same friends to visit him most weekends and lead him astray once again. One particular weekend, just before I jumped into my battered old Mini, I picked up my mates and turned up the volume on my car stereo to 11 to drive down to Manchester to the soundtrack of Liberator by Spear of Destiny and Ace of Spades by Motorhead. Most people will have heard Ace of Spades, but very few will have heard Liberator. So it would be great to hear just a few bars of the... This is a confession and a request.
This is great. Spear of Destiny, everyone.
Okay, Spear of Destiny. So he's cruising down to Manchester listening to this. It's rubbish, by the way. Anyway, Spear of Destiny, not often on Radio 2.
No.
I don't think They'll Never Take Me Alive was a very
That's
fine
a great
song.
track.
Anyway, I wrote myself... so it'd be great to hear a few bars of the chorus. Well, that was all you're going to get, John. I then wrote myself a brief 2-line note and in my haste left it on the kitchen table. This is important to the confession. So this is not about what happened in Manchester that weekend, which involved, amongst other things, a hedge, a bucket, a copy of War Cry, a baked potato, an ashtray and Madonna, though not in person. But we'll leave it at that. Like most mothers, my mum was constantly worried about her son. My mum's main worry was my lack of a girlfriend. In fact, my mum was so worried that she'd sat me down for a talk, and it was during this talk that she uttered the immortal words, and yes, I am using the right word here, because it's the 80s. She said to me, "I hope you're not one of those heterosexuals." Anyway, my dad guffawed so much he nearly swallowed his false teeth. My mum to this day doesn't know what she said or what the intimation was. Anyway, now 18-year-old sons don't tend to be very considerate to their mothers. They do not think of the consequences of their actions. So when I went on my weekly weekend sojourn south to Manchester, I would just say, right, I'm off to see Mike, see you Sunday. No explanation of where I was going, no contact details, no telephone number, no address. Didn't care. This was before mobile phones, of course. So when my mum found this note... soon after I left on the Friday, she had no way to contact me. She fretted and worried about her poor boy all weekend. Despite my dad's reassurances that I would be fine, my mum, having read this note, could not rest until her son returned home. So when I finally arrived home late Sunday, exhausted from having too much of a good time, I was met by my mum at the front door, immediately firing questions at me. "Are you okay, John? Why didn't you tell me?" And then saying, "I've been so worried about you all weekend." I just looked at my mum blankly, a look I've perfected over the years. I hadn't a clue what she was going on about. She unfolded the note and handed it to me, saying, "I found this. I didn't even know you had a girlfriend." Being a caring, loving son, I did what most caring, loving sons would do at a time like this, and to my eternal shame, burst out laughing. See, Father Simon, as an 18-year-old, I was really into my music, and had simply written down 2 songs that I wanted to buy, and had then promptly forgotten all about the note. Anyway, the note said this: Jilted John, then, Joe Jackson, is she really going out with him?
Oh, yeah.
My mum, of course, had never heard of Jilted John or Joe Jackson, put 2 and 2 together and got 367. Her poor boy had been jilted by a floozy of a girl for a scoundrel called Joe Jackson, the absolute cad. Well, yes, it's true, Mother. Joe Jackson has run off with my gal. She really is going out with him. She really is going to take him home tonight, because if my eyes didn't deceive me, there is something very wrong around here, I said. "You'll be all right, love," she said. Anyway, it all came out in the wash. And so, Father Simon, I should feel guilt, especially having been married to a Catholic for nearly 20 years, but the memory of this story still makes me laugh. And just in case some of your listeners are also wondering, I can exclusively confirm I am, in fact, one of those heterosexuals. John, but not Jilted John, who once upon a time was in Wigton, which is where, I do believe, Melvin went to school, but it was a lot more successful than Jilted John. Anyway, Sister Rebecca is about to pronounce.
I think the mother should have been relieved, really, because she was worried about him. So I think for that reason, he really should have been, happy that the mother had found the note. And I suppose if I was him, I would have burst into laughter as well, because it was quite ridiculous.
Could have been a lot worse if you were leaving a note for your mum based on song titles.
So I think, no harm really came of any of this, apart from the mum being a bit embarrassed, I suppose, when he laughed at her. But she should be happy because he had a girlfriend, and that's it. I'm going to forgive.
Okay, very good. So Sister Bobby is going to go next. She's from the Priory.
It's lovely, isn't it? What a lovely... You did say, actually, John, that you made an innocent mistake, and it was really an absolute innocent mistake. No malice, no nothing. You didn't even intend to it. No product of forethought, anything. Just one misunderstanding that actually turned out right in the end, and you can't really do wrong with that, can you? So, of course, you're forgiven. And your mum's forgiven for worrying, as she should, because that's what mums do.
Well, now, I know you enjoyed the little track, a little bit of Spear of Destiny.
Yes, I'm going to forgive for 3 reasons, and one of those is because of Spear of Destiny, and we can never get enough of that on Radio 2. The other is because it was set in Cumbria. I used to live in Cumbria. I spent 5 years in Cumbria. I met my wife in Cumbria, and it is a wonderful part of the world.
Yeah, okay, get on with it.
And the third reason is that we didn't change his name, because normally, as you know, with these confessions, the BBC lawyers insist on changing everyone's names because they are worth every penny. And I, for that reason, am going to forgive, because John has decided to come out as John as opposed to Jimmy.
This one comes from Bob. Thank you, Bob. Dear Father Simon and hopefully forgiving crew, with the England-Australia continued battle for cricket's sacred urn happening right now, how topical is this? I seek forgiveness for a crime I committed on a rather arrogant Australian work colleague and cricket fan some 10 years ago. Let me cast your mind back to the summer of 2005. It was the summer of the most eagerly anticipated Ashes cricket test series in England. The nation was eagerly anticipating a tightly fought battle with a victory for English cricket. At the time, I was teaching in a secondary school in the northeast of England. Amongst our staff was a newly appointed teacher from Australia. Shall we call him Mr. Bruce? I think we shall. Typically, he was full of pomp and bravado, and confidently predicting a 5-0 whitewash to the Aussies. In the staff room on the day before the Ashes series began, I publicly called him to account and asked him to put his money where his mouth was. Being a typical Antipodean, he refused hard cash, but we shook hands on a slab of stubbies. Do you know what that means?
I'm going to guess that's beer, isn't it?
English translation, tray of beers, to
Yeah.
and the accent was, again, spot on there, I think.
Yes, well done.
Mr. Bruce arrogantly went off for his summer holidays. I don't know how you go off for your summer holidays in an arrogant manner. Anyway, he did. Demanding that on the first day back after the summer break, I should place a slab of stubbies on his desk in the classroom. It's getting better. The summer holidays, as history recalls, witnessed one of the most exciting Ashes test services of all time. The games ebbed and flowed, and when school returned after the summer break, the series was tightly balanced, with only the final test at the Oval remaining. Australia needed a win to retain the Ashes. A draw would do for England. The final test was an absolute classic, with England eventually claiming the draw that earned the return of the Ashes to England soil for the first time since 1987, with Kevin Pietersen, the nation's favourite, scoring a century on the last day. The following day in school was euphoric for all English cricket fans. Mr. Bruce, surprisingly, was nowhere to be found. He failed to join the staff for morning briefing, so I went in search of him at lunchtime. When he was eventually found, I congratulated him and his team on a classic battle, offered his team hard lines, and reminded him that he had a bet to settle. A tray of English bombardier was my request. His response was unrepeatable. I politely reminded him of his duty to honour a hand-crossed public wager. The next morning, Mr. Bruce again refused to pay up on the bet, and for the following I request forgiveness, Father Simon. Due to his refusal to pay up on the said bet that morning, I immediately primed all my teaching classes and sent students with copied photos of the successful English cricket team holding the urn aloft to his classroom at 20-minute intervals. I asked each student to politely knock, enter the room and give the picture to Mr. Bruce, smile at him and ask if there was a message for me. The first 4 students were given a polite no in reply. Students 5 and 6 were told with contempt, "Go away." By the time student number 7 had visited Mr. Bruce, he had lost it. He grabbed the photo from this student's hand, ripped the photo up in front of said student, and shouted at the student to get out of my classroom and tell your sad cricket-supporting teacher not to send anyone else to my classroom or there will be repercussions.
This is getting better.
Thanks very much.
Amazing.
Wow.
Thanks.
Uncanny.
I'm warming up. Upon return to my room, and after an excellent description from student number 7, I realised that Mr. Bruce was close to losing it. I held back on sending any further students to him that day, but hatched a bigger plot overnight to make further fun of our defeated Australian import. Mr. Bruce was fairly new to the school, and he didn't know all the names of the students I'd sent to him that day. In the hatched plan, student number 7 was to be fictitiously called Sarah Peterson, and her father was, of course, going to be called Kevin. The plan was that said student had returned home the previous afternoon very upset after being aggressively shouted at by Mr. Bruce, and that Mr. Peterson had written a letter of complaint to Mr. Bruce asking why he could not honourably accept defeat in the Ashes. The letter of complaint from the fictitious Mr. Kevin Peterson was written overnight, and with most of the staff in on the joke, it was presented to Mr. Bruce in his classroom by his head of department at the start of the day. before the students arrived, claiming it had been hand-delivered to the school. Well, I quickly went to Mr. Bruce's classroom to see what was happening. I walked in to see him pacing the room with the fictitious letter in his hand. I asked if he was all right. "All right, you pommy." I can't read that next one. He replied, "Because of your flipping antics yesterday, I received a letter of complaint and it's all your fault."
Hang on. We're going into LA here, aren't we?
Oh, are we? Okay.
Don Johnson is alive and well.
It'll end up as Ray Winston, as everyone does. "Who's it from?" I asked, trying not to burst into laughter. "The parents of the last student." "Okay, mate. The parents of the last student you sent me yesterday." "And the parent's name is?" I asked, pointing to the letter. He looked at it. "Mr. Kevin Peterson." I started smiling at Mr. Bruce, and slowly the penny dropped. Mr. Bruce walked slowly to... This is where it's definitely going to go Winston. Mr. Bruce walked slowly towards me and growled in my face. "Oh, look, mate, you're lucky you're in school classroom right now. If we weren't, I'd headbutt you right in the face."
Nice.
I made a fairly sharp exit from his classroom. I reminded him in an Australian accent that he still owed me a slab of stubbies, which I expected in my classroom the following morning. Now, Father Simon, this is where I really need your forgiveness. The slab of stubbies never materialised the next day, and neither did Mr. Bruce. He resigned from his post that night with immediate effect. He was last seen booking a one-way ticket to Australia and hasn't been in contact with anyone from the school since. So, Father Simon and the Unholy Trinity, forgiveness, please, for using students in a school as part of the wind-up against our Australian friend, allowing another member of the teaching profession to target our Antipodean friend, forcing said Antipodean friend into fleeing our school and country. And I'm still waiting for payment of said bet. Anyway, it's Bob's Jape in happier times. 2005, famous victory. All Mr. Bruce had to do was to buy the beer. That's all he had to do. And the whole thing would be over and everything was done and dusted, but he couldn't manage that. And so he had to resign. Anyway, Sister Rebecca.
I was going to say it was a bit odd that he was putting students, potentially their lives in danger by sending them in. And student number 7, given actually now that we know he was a violent man, Mr. Bruce, student 7 could have really been physically harmed in some way. Luckily, nobody was hurt. The guy, the fact that he
I
didn't...
think you're overly dramatising.
No, I'm not. I mean, he threatened to headbutt the...
Well, it was he
threatened
said,
to headbutt
but
Bob.
He didn't.
Not very nice. And also the fact that he didn't honour the bet. So he was just a poor sport in every way. So I'm going to forgive because it was totally justified.
Thank you, Sister Rebecca. And now we have the novice from...
Novice Land.
Yes.
I don't want to say this is stereotyping of Aussies, because it's not. And you talked about happier times, because I think they could be happy times, because we could still win this Ashes series, so fingers crossed on that front. But it's a really good example of someone who can give it out, but they can't take it back.
That's right.
And Mr. Bruce, absolutely terrible man. And obviously, verging on psychotic by the sounds of it, couldn't take a joke, couldn't see the funny side, had no sense of humour, and was threatening very nasty physical violence. So absolutely forgiven Bob, because Bruce is a nutter, and the school was better off without him, even if he did leave in rather dramatic fashion.
Mate. Yeah, that's true. I'm all warmed up now.
I've gone out.
Here we go.
Matthew, what do you make of this then?
A message to our Australian cousin of a gentleman never Welshes on a bet. And if you decide that you feel so confident that you're going to win 5-0 and then you get tonked by the England cricket team in 2005, then you need to honour your bet, sir. And so for that reason, I am definitely going to forgive.
Well, they were this week's confessions. Well, they were this week's confessions. If it sparked a little thought in your head, somewhere deep in your soul, let me know yours, please. Confessions@bbc.co.uk. More in a week, and the Weekly Mayo available to download right now.